Hi, I'm Jotham Corbett. I'm a patient at the Early Psychosis Program.
Hi, and I'm Dr. Jason Morrison. I'm a psychiatrist. I'm the director of the Nova Scotia Early Psychosis Program, Halifax. So I guess we're here today to talk a little bit about, Jotham, you're involved in a grassroots effort in Nova Scotia to try to convince the provincial government here in Nova Scotia to make a modification to the privacy laws to make it easier for families to be involved with people experiencing a first episode of psychosis or some other kind of serious mental health problem, to make it easier for people to access care. And that there's the idea that privacy laws can actually get in the way of that sometimes. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Could you tell a little bit about your own experience and how it connects with this project?
So my own experience with psychosis, I was addicted to crystal meth for about 5 years, and that triggered a lot of psychotic episodes. But the last psychotic episode that I had, I was very, very manic at the same time, and it was kind of on the streets of Vancouver, and didn't really know what was going on because of my anosognosia. And essentially what happened was I was running around for a little while, and then I got picked up involuntarily, and then at first I was super apprehensive to get treatment. I was completely against the whole thing. Like I didn't know that I was ill. I didn't know that I needed help.
Right.
And after a while, I sort of like started to clue into little things, like little switches came on here and there, like giving my parents the consent to basically be in my life, involved in my life, and involved in my circle of care. That was a really, really powerful thing that I was able to do, because it allowed for them to plan to bring me back to Nova Scotia. Otherwise I wouldn't be able to communicate anything about my and it's really hard too, when I was being in BC and then them being in Nova Scotia, like
Right.
just trying to communicate, like they were trying to communicate through the police, and it wasn't, this is a little bit of a I digress here, but so they talked to a cop, and the only reason that the cop was able to disclose any information, like he wasn't really supposed to do it, but then him and my mom connected because his parents were both teachers.
Oh, interesting.
So
she kind of finessed the situation.
Yeah, exactly. So
otherwise, they might not have known what was really going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are those little nuggets that just kind of presented themselves, and
you use this kind of big word, anosognosia. Can you just say a bit about what do you mean by that? People probably don't know that word.
So anosognosia is a symptom of an illness. In my situation, it's psychosis, where you're essentially not aware that you're sick, or that you're not aware that you're ill.
Yeah. And
this can be extremely problematic because, when you're trying, if you need to access treatment, if you need to access services, if you need to access support, it can, if you're not aware that you have a problem, how are you going to get better, right? Like it's pretty straightforward.
Mostly works with people who have psychosis. It's a huge thing, because when you're frightened and terrified about what's going on, the last thing you're thinking is, hey, this is a mental health problem.
Absolutely.
And even if you kind of think about maybe it is, with all of the stigma and things connected with psychosis and mental illness, people don't want it to be that either, really. Yeah. So it's like, even if you have a bit of an idea, that's not the first thing that you're thinking about.
Absolutely.
So people don't run to the doctor when this is going on. They might run to the police, though, right?
Yeah, and speaking for myself too, like if someone were to give me a pamphlet on anosognosia while I was psychotic, I wouldn't even be able to read it. I would be like, right. You know what I mean? Right. Just completely. I'd be in such a high state of fight or flight that
like you were worried actually that there was a conspiracy to capture you, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, if someone came and you say, "Oh, Jotham, don't worry, actually that's not what's going on. You just have this illness happening in your brain. It's called psychosis." How do you think you would have understood that at the time?
Well, I that would almost play into the conspiracy.
It would almost make you think this is someone trying to pull the wool over your eyes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It was interesting because I would kind of come in and out of it in some ways. So I did get evaluated for psychosis. The cops helped me get evaluated for psychosis at a hospital in West Vancouver, and but I was able to kind of just like snap out of it for a brief period of time, and then I checked all the boxes that I needed to check, and then they're like, "Oh, you're fine. We're just going to release you."
Oh, so
And this happens all the time with people. You know?
It does, yeah. I mean, it depends on the mental health law in each province. Nova Scotia's actually are quite, I would say, they really facilitate people getting into treatment. Where I worked in Quebec and other provinces, it's someone has to be in imminent danger to themselves or to someone else.
Right.
Whereas in Nova Scotia, just if someone has a course of symptoms that seems like it's going to lead them to a situation that could be dangerous, you can kind of hold people and treat them against their will.
Mm-hmm.
But that's sort of the whole rationale, is that one of the main symptoms of having a serious mental illness is that you don't realize that you have a serious mental illness. So you're never going to really consent to this, because often it gets woven into the worry or delusion that you have, like you explained, hey?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, how does this map back up into the privacy that we kind of started off with? Why is that? How are these things linked?
So, I mean, if you're not able to advocate for yourself and you're not able to make informed decisions that are going to affect the outcome of your well-being and your recovery and all that stuff,
yeah,
then you really need somebody else to step in and do it for you.
Okay.
You know, or at least have them involved.
So in your case, this was your parents,
absolutely,
yeah. And you were in BC and they were in Nova Scotia, but they could hear you on the phone and they know, hey, this isn't Jotham, this isn't my son. Something's gone wrong here. There's some health problem occurring here.
Yeah, there was an inclination of that early on, but they didn't really quite understand because they were uneducated themselves.
Right.
It wasn't until going through this process that they became more educated.
I see. So when they got involved, you didn't trust the police. You probably wouldn't have trusted necessarily people in the hospital. You trusted your parents.
Yeah. Because
they're your parents. So when they said, "Hey, Joth, why don't you come home?" and then actually, I guess when they suggested that you come here, you were okay with that. Why didn't that get woven into the kind of paranoia and stuff that you had?
That's a good question.
Do you think it's because your parents vouched for it?
I think that well, originally I was apprehensive to it because I wanted to stay in Vancouver because I was living there and it was like, you know,
it's your home.
It's like, oh, it's my home right now, and I didn't want to like leave my life in Vancouver and go out, you know, go back to Nova Scotia necessarily. But they, you know, there's just something about like having that solid backbone, you know what I mean? That is just, you know, in a crisis situation like that, whether I was aware, you know, like, you know, sort of rationally aware of like whether it was a crisis or not.
Yeah.
There was something inside of me that just kind of that gravitated towards that eventually, and I just made the decision to do that.
But did you have a sense of maybe there being a problem or being in trouble in some way?
Yeah.
On some level?
Yeah, definitely.
Like you may not have framed it up as a mental health problem, but you knew that there was some problem that you were having that maybe your parents could help you out with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think like I'm aware of the group of parents that's trying to influence or trying to persuade the government to make a small change to the privacy legislation, because the standards sometimes around enforcement of privacy can make it hard to access care. I guess that would have been a bit invisible to you at the time, but like if for example you were seen in an emergency and got referred for an appointment, and when we called you, you didn't answer because you didn't think it was important, because you didn't see it as a mental health problem. If your parents called and say, "Hey, we're really concerned, we can bring him," I mean, our team, we really work hard to work flexibly with that, but that's not always the experience that everyone has. Yeah. I know Nancy Saunders and others have the experience where they're told, "Sorry, we can't speak to you because you're not the person," and cite kind of like privacy laws. So I guess you're really highlighting why it's important for both the health authority and also maybe it has to do with legislation, maybe it has to do with policy changes within the way we work in the health authority to make this easier for families to advocate for their loved one they're concerned about.
Definitely. I mean, like I firmly believe that if things didn't work out the way that they did with, you know, me giving consent to my parents and me getting, you know, voluntarily admitted, like I'd be like we talked about before, you know, going through the same cycle and patterns of psychosis and meth use and, you know, homelessness and all that stuff, or, you know, I could have just died.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, let's pause on that for a second, because You know, on the face of it, when you hear about mental health law where you can be forced into a hospital against your will, I mean, if you committed no crime, it almost sounds like it's almost like going to jail in a way, that your human rights restricted, you're forced into a hospital, and even if you don't want medication, you can be given medication against your will.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a pretty big violation of usual rights people have, right?
Controversial for sure. Yeah.
It sounds like how do you think about this now that you were someone that lived through this? Do you think that it's important, or when you look back on it?
I think that, like I said, you know, if it didn't pan out the way that it did, like, I would not be here today. You know,
Okay.
like, I would be. I don't even want to think about it really, because it's like, you know, the chaos and the you know, the catastrophic situation that I was in. The only way that someone could have pulled me out of that was to just literally take me and, like,
Right.
against my will, you know what I
Right.
mean? And looking back, I really appreciate that was the case, because, you know, I'm really doing well in my recovery now, and you know, I just
You might not have been able to do it without this as a first step.
absolutely.
Yeah. So as someone that's kind of lived through both sides of it, being the person that is has their rights stripped away for this brief period for the treatment, and now coming out the other side, you think that these are important laws to have?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that we need to think of the ways that we change the wording of the legislation so that we can make exceptions for those people that can't advocate for themselves.
Right. Well, I think it's entirely possible to have a system where people's health privacy is respected, but there's still a way for families and concerned other people to be involved to make sure people get access to care.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Should we pause there? Because pause now.